Okay, so let's get started here. I'm Carol, and I work in the Orem office for Blomquist. And as you know, I've done quite a few of these. So if you know me by now, then you've seen some of my videos on YouTube here on Blomquist, and you can find all the other videos that we talk about on our YouTube channel. So you're going to get a recording of this and the PowerPoint when for anyone that signed up for this live. So we'll send you that out later this week, and then it will be on YouTube, and you can watch it again too, or have anyone else watch it that you want to refer to those free recordings and webinars. And let's see, so reminder for everyone again, if your video is on, you're going to be in the recording because it will push it to my screen, and your video will be on in the recording. And then just keep yourself muted. We will chat along the way though. If you have a comment or question and you want to interrupt, great. Push the space bar and interrupt. And then if you have a comment though, or any questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'll check those along the way, and we can have some dialogue and some interaction also. So I'll be letting a few more people in here as we get started. So I have several books. I always reference them in the back. So as I go through those, just know that in the back of the PowerPoint, there's always references to those. And any other, some of the other webinars that I refer to, they're already on YouTube. If you want the PowerPoint to those and you haven't seen those or got, want the PowerPoint to them, just go ahead and email me and I can send you any of those workshops, those other workshops, past workshops. So there's a couple good ones coming up this next month, so watch for those. You can always sign up for our workshops on our website under workshops. And I have a teen anxiety program that's starting Monday, a week from today too. So if you have a teen that would like to join the anxiety program, it's a 5-week program. Go ahead and go to the website, Blomquist Health, and look at the information on that. So it's like 14 to 18-year-olds. So any questions on that, you can chat me. Everybody hear me okay? Someone chime in and tell me that my sound is okay. I just turned it up a little bit. And we'll get started. Good, okay, yay. So we're going to review parenting styles a little bit, and I've got a Love and Logic's workshop that goes over this extensively already, but I'm going to just review the parenting styles. A little bit of Running on Empty, that's this book that I kind of referenced already in the description, and what emotional neglect is. What the child-parent model is. It's quite deep, so we're going to get real deep real soon, and then know what phases you're in with that model. We're going to touch on a little bit of attachment style, and then how to fill your tank back up when it's empty. So running on empty, not so fun. Filling your tank is a little bit of work, but you can get there. Okay, so in this parenting styles, these 3 are the ones that don't work. These are 3 different, okay, titles, subjects, areas that don't work. So we've got 3 different people, 3 different theories, 3 different books there. So the Love and Logics is the 3rd one, the Gottman is the middle one, and I always butcher her name, but she's the authoritarian, the permissive, the neglective. So these are in order to their names of the type of parenting up here. So of course, the authoritarian is what we don't want. The authoritative is what we do want, and that's next in the next slide. But I was, keep those separated, the disapproving, the drill sergeant, they're all the same thing. They're aggressive, they battle, you have strict punishment, not even consequences, not even discipline, but it's punishment. Cold and inflexible, you have very clear rules, but you use fighting words. That's a Love and Logic's term, instead of thinking words. So neglectful, dismissive, TurboTax parent, that's a helicopter parent. TurboTax helicopter parent is one that goes in, they don't just helicopter, but they attack. So they get mad at the principal because the child, was a bully and punched another kid out on the playground, and they go in and get mad at the principal. So that's a TurboTax parent. Permissive, helicopter parent, just really rescuing parenting here in this this type. So just to keep in mind, these don't work. Statistically, they just don't work. And we've got lots and lots of years and years and years of understanding some of these. We definitely went from this in the early 1900s to the late 1900s and 2000s of permissive. We've gone to a lot more, the permissive and helicopter parenting. And so this is the one that works. We're going to talk about a little bit. That's opposite of emotional neglect is emotional coaching. That is, of course, Gottman's book that I have a whole workshop on. That's how to emotionally coach a child. The ineffective parent is just being, the effective parent is being all these things and more. So you thinking words and choices and clear consequences, but really you model behavior, you produce, in doing these things, you produce a responsible, self-identified concept and interdependence and healthy social skills. And they have, kids have better opinions about themselves and others, and emotional intelligence, self-discipline, all those things. So you think about, this is a workshop about how do we now become better parents in getting rid of our wounded child, right? Getting rid of that wound that is making us not be an effective parent. So of course, we have to understand that. How do we get to the empathy and the nurturing and your own identification, and how you get to coach and challenge, and instead of being a dictating parent. So, and you probably can pinpoint how you were raised. Go back to this slide and think, which one did you have in your life? So very common, by the way, to have two parents totally different. So if anybody wants to chat, like, oh yeah, I had this, and you can do that privately, you can do that to everyone, but I will never, in the recording would just keep out names, so it's confidential. But it's like, okay, yeah, I had authoritative mom and authoritarian dad, okay, or vice versa. And so that just makes very, very unclear expectations of your parent. So, and it's very difficult to say, wow, how do I parent now? What kind of parenting style am I going to be when I have children and start parenting? So what's emotional neglect? It's a parent's failure to respond to the child's emotional needs. Not all the time. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to have to meet our child's needs all the time, but the majority of the time. So let's just say over 50%. But so that one's very, that definition is like, okay, parents' failure to respond enough, to the child's emotional needs. It's like, enough means it's enough times, and it's a majority of the time that the child becomes emotional neglect, with their emotional needs are neglected. So emotional neglect is in some ways the opposite of mistreatment and abuse. Okay. So it's like, okay, well, what's abuse and what's not, that's a whole other workshop, but But whereas mistreatment and abuse are parental acts, okay, so they're very concrete and logical, right? We have laws. We do have, laws on that now. Emotional neglect is a parent's failure to act in their emotional needs. So it's a failure to notice, respond appropriately to the children's needs and feelings, and that's where it gets really gray area, right? So emotional neglect is the white space in the family picture. It's like, okay, that's kind of a funny concept to think of like, okay, where's the white space? When I was in grad school, we had, we analyzed family pictures and our own family pictures, and there is, it's a white space. There's where is a family disconnected, right? And you can tell. Now there's also families that are fake, but they're disconnected somehow in some other ways, but most time you can see that a little bit. You can think of your own family pictures. Be a challenge to go back and look at some of those. Okay. So Running on Empty by Webb is a book that I came across not too long ago, and from something else, and so I ordered her book, and it's really interesting parts of her book that I really enjoy, and we're going to get into that. But this is her website, emotionalneglect.com, and here's a YouTube that you can watch. I don't ever play the YouTubes. I just put them on here so you guys can watch them later. But this refers to the drive to, what she's talking about is counterdependence. So let me explain that. So counterdependent people, it refers to the drive to need no one, or more specifically, the fear of being dependent. So counterdependent people go to great lengths to avoid asking for help, to not appear to feel needy or anything like that. They are not codependent. They will make every effort not to rely on another person, even at their own great expense. So we're going to go over that. That's the key point that I want to hit on in this book, is about counterdependence. What happens to a child that has emotional neglect in their childhood will most likely become very counterdependent, even more than codependent. And you would think that, you'd go into codependency, but we're going to define both of those a little bit later on. But yeah, codependence is clear over here. Counterdependence is clear over here. So codependence goes into manipulation too. Counterdependent just says, I don't need any help. I don't want to rely on someone because I didn't need to rely on anyone when I was a child. So I'm going to become more dependent on just my own feelings. That's not so healthy. Not at all. So the key point of this is the way that we're treated emotionally by our parents determines how we treat ourselves as adults. So how our parents subconsciously, consciously, is like, no matter what, it makes a difference, especially by emotionally neglected kiddos. So if you're raised by emotionally neglected parents, some way, most of the time, then it's going to determine how you treat yourself as an adult and your adult relationships, because we're going to get into attachment. So this has been proven over and over again in studies, over and over and over and over again. So strive to get in touch with what you're feeling, including your pain. You can't give something you don't have. So those are some key points that we're going to talk about. How do we get in touch with ourselves, our feelings, including our pain? I always say, like, how do we resonate with the unwounded part of us? How do we get to the unhurt? That's more important to me than the hurt sometimes. We've got to find what's not hurt to get to the hurt, but we gotta go into the positive part of what part of your soul isn't wounded. And if you can find that helps also, but we've got to strive to say, okay, what's my pain from this experience, and then what part have I dwelt on that's unwounded. We're going to dwell on the unwounded, and then you can move forward through that, and move through it with some, a good therapist, with some other healing tools. And you can't give something you don't have. You can't parent to someone else or your kiddo something that you don't have. So we have to find the unwounded part so we can give that to our kids, right? So that's the point of that too. Okay, so in this book, it talks about 12 types of parenting that neglect. So I'm just going through the points to see, okay, so if I have an, wounded part of me and I had emotional childhood neglect, then what part of the parent gave me this wonderful gift of emotional neglect? So you're going to have to go into these. I didn't find them on her website, but they are in the book. But each one is like a whole several pages on each kind of parent. But these are just the list. You can kind of self-explanatory here, kind of tell which one was your parent, or the kind of parent you're doing, or you are now. Because if you didn't have an emotionally neglected parent, it's most likely that you won't go into some of these. But if you're in some of these now, most likely you had an emotionally neglected parent in some way. But here's the perfection focused parent, or the child as a parent. We're going to get into that. That's a very key point that I talk about that model all the time. The child is the parent, or the parent is the child. Okay. So if you were parentified, it's called, if you went into the parental role as a child, you were parentified. And that is extremely manipulative and neglectful, very emotionally neglectful. It can go into abusive. So the addicted parent, the divorced or widowed parent that's grieving, the permissive parent. So back to our list of these top 3 are definitely in our list of the wrong kind of parenting. So that's those. It's very interesting. Now, special needs family member parent. So if there was someone in your family, so it's like, well, they did the best they could with this special needs kiddo, and you were parentified with that, or how to take care of yourself because they were focused on the special needs kiddo. That's tough. So yeah, number 10, I love her description of that one. I won't go into it because we don't take time up, but the sociopathic parent is just one that doesn't have empathy and that can't have empathy. So that's just know that's there. And that, it might be something to look into and read. And it sounds awful, right? The sociopathic parent that can't be in your emotions. But it happens a lot. And that one really surprised me on her list. So you might have to download the book or get the hard copy. So, and this is the little list over here of just how to make sure you are in the supportive, unsupportive, demanding, we're in the supportive part. So this goes into the kind of a little box of different kinds of parenting. So, okay. 8 signs that you're being neglectful in your family right now, currently. So I put this in here because this was really interesting. So we can catch ourselves from switching over. The point of this book, too, is here's the first part of this book of what it looks like to be emotionally neglected. And then the last half of this book is how to get through to being a healthier person, connected to yourself and being a better parent. So, but check out this list. Are we having a hard time talking about certain feelings, conversations, really tough conversations? I call them hot topics. And I have parents and family and sibling, whoever needs to have a hot topic. Are we having a really hard time doing that? Are we having a hard time bringing up? We seldom bring up those negative, painful things that we need to talk about. So we shove them. We're passive, right? We're the helicopter parent or whatever. You sometimes feel unexpected resentment, anger. Are we having a lot of that? I mean, I have one workshop that I felt like was really relevant because I had lots of clients, and as a clinician that's full-time and a certified family life educator, it's like, okay, here's the dynamics of a family systems is what I was trained in extensively, and I've had extensive training after that in trauma focused. But it's like, okay, here's what we're doing is we're bullying inside of our home a lot. And this resentment and anger towards parents or another sibling, or it's like, what are we doing? And there is a workshop that's on that. So if you have a lot of contentious bullying going on in your family, then check out that workshop. I think it's called bullying. Something bullying, and it's what we're doing inside of our own home. So if we're having those problems, I have another one about technology in families, and it's like, what are we doing? Why are we so alone, but together? We're alone together. we're together a lot more statistically, but we're a lot more disconnected than we've ever been. And that is some of that is due to technology for sure. But we're just disconnected. We're way more disconnected in that way, but we're spending more time together. So we're home a lot more than we ever have been. And it's not because of COVID. So all these statistics are prior to COVID. COVID messed everything else up. So you feel surprisingly lonely or left out when you're with your family. That's what I'm talking about. This number 8 is like, wow, we are so separated in some of that, and we feel very lonely, but we're inside of our family. We have people around us, but we're very lonely and disconnected. Okay, so these are the ways that we keep running on empty. Okay, and we're going to definitely get to the ways to not run on empty, so we can get out of our emotional neglect. So we do poor self-soothing, so avoidances. So fulfilling avoidances is what that means. So when let me talk about avoidances and distractions. So this is how I talk about many workshops is distractions are okay. Distractions are 10 minutes to an hour for kiddos and 10 minutes to 2 hours for adults. We can have a good distraction and it's okay. We go to a movie, we watch a movie, we game for a little while, we do those things, but it's a certain amount of time. When we go into avoidances, we go into self-soothing avoidances of avoiding other things. We avoid homework, we avoid eating, sleeping, and avoid connection. So we go into gaming or technology like that. But we're going into the wrong avoidances, and we're not distracting. So that gets us really, really burned out, actually. So staying in this is keeping us running on empty, okay? Staying in the 3 phases. So I'm going to go over these books. This is the other books. See, these are old copies because they're old copies. So staying okay. So I'm okay. You're okay. And I'm going to go over these. The next slides are over this book. And so when I say staying in the 3 phases of not, I'm okay, you're okay, and you'll understand what that means in a minute. External forces and focuses. External. So when we're not in here and in our soul, fear is our ego and soul is love. So External comes from the ego. So we want to stay in our fear brain. You stay running on empty, and that's exactly what happens. Ignoring your emotional needs. Your parent, adult, child, PAC, that's what that means. That's what I'm going to go into, is this I'm okay, you're okay. Is your parent, adult, child roles. Okay. And of course, boundaries. I cannot say enough about boundaries over and over and over again. How to stay in your empty phase is having no boundaries or having very poor boundaries, and then staying in your trauma. That's a very big statement. So anyone have any questions about how to get out of your trauma? Because staying in your trauma is definitely your post-traumatic fear brain, and that's all it is. We all have post-traumatic, we all have trauma, and so we all staying in it means you're just not being present. You're in the past or the future, which is also fear brain. So your fight or flight, right? All those kind of things that we're going to talk about a little bit. Anybody have any questions so far? You can go ahead and chat me anytime you want in that chat form too. So this is what I was talking about with these two books. I have to clear my throat, and I talk all day long. And get some water. Okay, so parent ego, adult ego, child ego. Okay, so this is a model. And I'm just going to very vaguely touch on all this. It's very deep stuff to me, but it's very interesting, and I've used it for years. And so here's the parent model. Let's just go parent, adult, child. So the parent is something that you go into birth to 5 years old, okay? And this is super important to understand along with your emotional neglect as a kiddo. Because of course, the whole point of all this is how we move through it so we can be adults now, right? That's the point. But this is the parent ego state happens 0 to 5, and it's recording your external events. So it's what you're taught. So the example is you're going to hear and see what your parents did, but you go into the parent when you want to cope with parents or adult figures too. So this is it's a taught thing. Okay, it's external. You're going to model, or it's almost like a videotape, a movie of what you've learned from your parents, from your parental figures too. Okay, everything, your thoughts, feelings, everything, it's copied. So it's also it's opposite of internal. That's the child. So external is parent. So adult is 10 months on, the rest of your life. It's testing life. It's thoughts and feelings and direct responses of the here and now. And it's just what it is. You'll go into adult states. Child ego is 0 to 5 also, but it's internal events. So it's what you felt. So you're going to record that, and you're going to hold that in there, and you're going to be like, okay, that's how I felt. And every time you have that same feeling, you go back into the child ego state. Okay. Even if you're 49 now, if you're 16 now, it doesn't matter. You go back straight back into that 0 to 5 of the internal events of how you felt and the feelings. Okay. So replayed from your childhood. So what's wrong with these if you go into them now, into the parent or the child, is the question. I mean, do we go into adult? Adult? Let me mute someone. If you're not having a question, I will mute you. Okay. So if you don't have, any issues, with having that one time, that internal event of how you felt when someone bullied you, or someone, you know, 0 to 5, you had sibling issues, because birth order makes a big difference. I love, yeah, family systems and family studies of birth order. So there's lots of things that goes on in that stage of different birth orders, and how you felt with different siblings and how that worked. Okay. So the question is, again, is what's wrong with us going into the parental role or the child role? If you were, like, say, in a marriage or in a partnership. This is what I teach couples all the time. The biggest thing that I see in a couple and in a family is switching roles back from parent to child. And what that does is, and there's another triangle that I use all the time with that too, is it makes us drop into those feelings and those events of external and internal, and it really messes up our relationship as two adults. Okay, can you see how that works? If one drops into the child role and the other one's a parental role, and you're married, it gets really, lack of better word, kind of gross. It is just doesn't work. So we want, now this is ego state and then roles. We want us to be in two direct adult roles and healthy in the here and now. So just think about that. That's a whole very deep concept. And so this is what it looks like. Okay. I'm not okay, you're okay. Or is what we want. I'm not okay, you're okay. Okay. So look at this little example of what happens, all these red ones of I'm not okay. And this is what you get, you get to the helpless. I'm not okay, but you're okay. I mean, look, there's a one-up position there. And then it's like, well, I'm not okay and you're not okay, so nobody's okay. That's the child. You're both in the child role, in the child ego. So that doesn't work in a partnership either. But think about with your kiddo. If I'm in the child role and I've got a teenager, and I mean, it's just how it works, right? With the parentification, then if a teenager's parentifying me, then it's I'm okay, but you're not okay, so I'm going to rescue you. And then that child goes into the parentification. So what we do with teenagers is ask them where they're going, what they're doing. I'm in the parental role. I'm okay and you're okay, and I want to make sure you stay okay. And that's the healthy position to be in. And that gets us to a very a good space for everyone. So this is an old time book. I want to say, I was thinking it was, what year is it? I'd have to look at my references, but I've had this book forever, but it's very old. So you can go into this a lot more with this book, and staying okay is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So same authors. And how do we stay okay now that we know this, right? So this is the I'm okay, you're okay flow up here. I love this analogy. So because I use fight, flight, or freeze all the time. So here's what happens, right? When we freeze, when we flee, or we flee or flight, we flee out of here. We have a flight. And if we fight, then we're just in the blaming and the resentment and the bullying and the frustration, the anger. Freeze is just stonewalling, stop. Stuffers turn into volcanoes. They'll end up fighting eventually. But those are all the things that become passive, hopeless, helpless. I'm not okay, you're not okay. So I love the analogy of this one in and just putting this all together. And if you're both not okay, you're both in this very low triangle of child role. So we want to be the adult, role and in the adult ego. So now, before we get to how to stay okay and how to get to the part that we want to be secure, we have to understand a little bit of the attachment theory. I do have, I think in a month or two, the attachment parenting workshop scheduled that's just going to be on attachment. I am a trained attachment EMDR therapist. I am an attachment theorist. I have lots of, I'm a play therapist trained in attachment. Attachment is very, very crucial to understand. It's not a disorder, it's an attachment style. And so, but a lot of our, I guess, stress, anxieties come from attachment. Now, attachment happens 0 to 3, and that's it. It's 0 to 3. And then 0 to 6 until the brain's the brain develops over 80% from 0 to 5 to 6 until they go off to kindergarten. So it's like, this is super, super important. The child part, the parent part, 0 to 5, and attachment 0 to 3. So this is where it happens, honestly. And everything from here on out affects the rest of our lives. So there's a secure, an avoidant, an anxious, and kind of a disorganized attachment. So the secure is like, okay, I have distress when the mom leaves, but I'm happy when the mom returns and I feel comfort and I'm okay because the mom comes and picks me up from daycare and I do okay, right? So that's normal. Distress when mom leaves, that's normal. If you didn't have distress when a parent or a caregiver left, that meant you were actually an avoidant attachment. An anxious attachment goes overboard. So we talk about this, anxious, anxiety, separation disorders, things like that. It's a lot more to do with attachment. So here's the dismissing or the preoccupied. So there's a little bit of that there. It's just to pay attention to. So you can say, how do I connect with my emotional needs now? Because this has to do with how you relate as an adult. And I have a book referenced in the back of this about that. It's called Attached. So, I'm a Charlie Brown fan, so let's take a break about this. You all know that they all have personalities, right? That are in an anxious or an avoidant or a secure attachment. So dismissing is like, okay, that's the avoidant, the fearful avoidant maybe. So it's like anxious, anxious and preoccupied. But secure is just like this, apparently peppermint patty. So a little bit of a visual there. High anxiety, afraid of abandonment, low anxiety, I am avoidant. Okay, so high anxiety, attached attachment, and avoidant attachment. Okay, so this is another one. What's your current attachment style? Okay, so here's children, adult, and parent. Okay, once again, the cycle of the child, adult, parent, and what this looks like if you're in an anxious attachment style. We want to give children a secure attachment style. And then if you don't have one as a child or don't have one now, good news. There's a book that teaches you how to get into a secure attachment. You can change your attachment style as an adult, and you can change your emotional neglect into a positive attachment style. So the thing is we have to go into some work into that, but it's definitely possible. So if you're with an avoidant and an anxious, and you are in a partnership, avoidant, anxious. I mean, so when an anxious gets more anxious, the avoidant gets more avoidant, and they start chasing each other. It's really dysfunctional. And so what happens is it just gets wider and wider and more anxious and more avoidant. And then this huge wedge is in between. And most of the time, if you're one of those two, you're going to find each other, an avoidant and an anxious. And so what happens is two anxious, sometimes that happens, two anxious people hook up, but there's usually one or the other. And so if a disorganized attachment is all over the place, you don't know what, a person's avoidant and needy, and avoidant and needy, avoidant and needy. So remember, so go back to the words codependent and counterdependent. This is why I'm bringing this up. So go back to that slide. I'm not going to go all the way back. But think about what a counterdependent is. So when I read this book, it was like, okay, this is so awesome. Counterdependent. I've always heard of codependent. That's been out since the 70s. Codependency, what that looks like, manipulation in relationships to attachment styles in your caregiving and in your adult relationships. But then here's counterdependent. Counterdependent is an avoidant attachment, and codependency is a very anxious attachment. So you get, I don't need your help, and the codependent is, you need my help. You need me. I need to rescue you. I need you. And that becomes very toxic. Super fun. If that sounds familiar, chat me if you have any questions on that, or comment on that if you need to. So let's spend 10 minutes on how to get full again and how to fill up our tanks. So as I just talked about, that interdependence, not counterdependence. Okay, so here's codependent, here's counterdependent. Now interdependence is in the middle, okay? So interdependence, so dependent, we are dependent. We are human. We are actually wired for that, right? There is no doubt that that's going to go away. We're actually we do need connection. So we need things. We need. So if we go into dependence, okay, we're dependent. It's okay. So interdependence is Stephen Covey's term, and I don't have his book reference in this, but in 7 Habits, he references it to interdependence. That's the goal. It's the highest level of a secure attachment. See how these all go in together. So it's a very secure attachment. We're still dependent, but we're interdependent also. And we need things and people and connection, but we're not counterdependent and we're not codependent. So cool, right? I think that's so cool. Getting into interdependence is a secure attachment. Self-monitoring emotions, that's how we fill up our tank. So sort out where our parent, adult, child is. Where is our adult? Why do we go into adult roles or parental roles over our siblings? The ones that we grew up with, right? We go into parental roles over our siblings. Usually that's the family hero. It's usually the oldest kiddo. They'll go over that and be the parental, they'll jump into the parental role constantly. The child kiddo will stay in their child role, and the child ego when they're the youngest, because they're the lost child. The last child, always the lost child. The middle kid is just the scapegoat, and they go all over the place, but they're usually very interdependent when after, turning out, middle kids actually turn out a little bit stronger in that way, actually. Okay, so let's see, sorting. So I'm going to go over the sorting part. So how do you sort? So this is a really awesome word. So on page 25, it talks about sorting in the saying okay. And so I just really like this analogy. So we're going to do a little analogy real quick. So everybody think of something that they need to clean out in their house, their car, their office drawer, they're somewhere in their environment. There's 9 environments. We need to clean something out. So how do you sort? How do you sort, clean out a drawer, a sock drawer, sort socks, okay? So, so this is like literally how you sort. And this is an example of mind sorting. So it's like a messy drawer. I love the analogy. I've used this so many times in interventions of cleaning something out of your life and cleaning something up. That's how you fill your tank, literally, by physically doing it and emotionally doing it. Okay. So as you mind the mind to a messy drawer, so it's likened to a mind of a messy drawer, the mind to the messy drawer. There we go. Which everyone often, we can often relate to this. The mind is messy, a drawer is messy, right? So how do we sort it out? I'm just going to read here. It takes a long time to examine every item and put it in back where it belongs. And during the analysis of the use of the drawer is significant. Well, it's talking about some transitional analysis. So in TA, we force down a couple of divisions. Start by putting things in their place into a couple of their divisions. You just put it into sections, right? So think about, here's your parent, adult, child. So sort those out. When you're making decisions, when you're having issues with someone, sort out what child role you went into, or what parent role you went into, or which ego you're in, your fear brain. And then take advantage of that. We have the use of the drawer. This process is similar to scheduling. It goes on to other things like, so like rebuilding a railroad bridge one tie at a time. You can think of that analogy. The trains can keep running on it, right? So he just uses another analogy there. So that's just an example of sorting. So we can sort out things. And if we're present, remember, in the here and now, we're not in fear brain. That's the midbrain. The frontal lobes is to sort. That's where we organize our thoughts. We organize, we make decisions, we have a reward system, all those kind of things. I talk about that in the thinking errors class a lot, how to, get a hold of our thinking errors. So self-soothing is there, right? You've heard of self-soothing. I call it self-soothing more than self-care, but here's self-soothing. And so this is where she gets into self-care. Okay, so chapter 7 is all on self-care, and she goes into all of that. If you want a very basic self-care saying no sheet, there you go. It's like how to say no, okay? And you keep track of when you said no to people, having boundaries, asking for help. That's the opposite of counterdependence. So she goes into these, ideas, likes and dislikes of your change sheet. So she gives some more ideas of enjoyment sheet you can record. So any of these that you can record on to help you kind of just keep track. Awareness is key, right? So learning to nurture yourself. This is her chapter 7, improving self-discipline, self-soothing, and having compassion. So remember, however your parents treated you in general is how you treat yourself, your soul. How you were loved is how you're going to love yourself, and that's your soul. So having compassion for yourself, part 4, is super hard. I find that I help people find, because it's super difficult. When you're a parent, you go into guilt, you go into shame, you just opposite of self-soothing and self-compassion, because you're so used to not getting that from a caregiver from your childhood. Is that making sense? That part. So you can go into these self-care. So those are the 4 types. Learning to nurture yourself, nurture your soul, okay, is love, is the love part. If your soul is lost, dead, shriveled up, I challenge you to find it. You got to find it. And that's how we get through this. And then you have self-discipline, then you're going to self-soothe. Self-soothing is different than self-care. Self-soothing the soul, and then having compassion for yourself. That is all the love part. And then the do messages is in this book. These are awesome. So I'm going to first go over the don'ts, because that's what Harris in this book does. He says he has don't messages. So it's like, okay, here's some don't messages. Don't do this for a period of time. So like, don't be clothes. Don't be important. Don't be a child. Don't grow. These are all the don't messages that our parents give us, okay, as a parent role. So it's like, if you can be okay if you don't do this, if you don't lie, if you don't cheat, if you don't do this, you're going to be okay. What kind of messages does that send to our kiddos? Don't be noisy. You can be okay if you don't be noisy, if you're not close to me. If you don't grow, what else did I say? You don't succeed. And don't be you. That's a big one. That one always, and don't belong, and don't be you. So you can be okay only if you don't belong. Do you see the don't messages? So the do messages, on page 56, what did I say? 36, I mean. So those are the 30, it starts on page 35 of this book. So it's okay, you're okay if, you do this, and the do messages, do your best, try hard, things like that. So I always refer this also to the growth mindset parenting, is failure's okay. This is just for learning. You're going to make it. You're going to do okay. Okay is my favorite word, actually. And I say that all the time. Okay is a great word. You're going to be okay. Or, okay is the magical word, is a workshop that I did over a year ago. And it's about following instructions. So you just say okay. So staying okay is saying you are okay as a child like this, and as an adult, you can be yourself if if you're doing that too. So that's those messages. And so if you do messages, you're going to fill up the tank, and you're going to fill up your kids' tank. And when you're parenting, we have to fill up their tank and our tank and stay whole. Remember, because we can't give something to our kiddos that we don't have. I can't give to my kiddos something I don't have. So you have to write and practice and ask and teach that and model that. And you might not have had that as your own modeling, but you can do it now. So building your children. Okay. So how you fill up the tank, yours and theirs, building children. Chapter 14 is, which book am I in on that one? Building children. Pretty sure it's this one. I'm just saying okay, but maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, so it's the okay one, staying okay. So staying okay, again, same one. But chapter 14, 254, it starts going into how to build children. So if that one's really interesting, and by the way, these are old time, these two, staying okay and I'm okay, you're okay books. They have full PDFs on this book for free if you Google them. So you can read, you can go to chapter 14. You can find chapter 14 and just go through that one in a PDF. And so it goes through acceptance and awareness and honesty and talking straight. So that's some of the and consistency and hope and repetition. So So think about repetition. In Love and Logics, of course, here's the limits and the choices. Here's your 2 choices, and I'm going to be consistent with that. That's what builds kids. And so these all go together, and these are old. Love and Logics is in the 90s. These are from the 50s, and so most of them are old-time models, but they all go together. So secure attachment, and we went over that. How to be a secure attachment is to be in a regular adult role, and switching back from parent to child gets us in trouble. Okay, so any questions and comments? We are on the hour, half hour, so 1 hour. So any comments or questions from all of that, all combined together, these 2 main books. Mindsight's a good one. Here's Attached, and Staying Okay, and Raising Emotionally Intelligent Child by Gottman. That's how we stay into an emotional, opposite of emotional neglect, emotional intelligent. And Love and Logics by Klein. So anything else? And if you privately chat me, of course, I'm the host, and you're gonna have to send it straight to me. So any other questions before we end this? Not, I will send you my email again if you need anything from us here at Blomquist, and you need any further. We have lots of parenting workshops that are already on YouTube, and therapy and parenting sessions for anybody that needs to come on in. So
will this link be posted or emailed to the email that we signed up with?
With the email that you signed up for, you'll get the PowerPoint and the recorded version of this just to your email, and then it will go on YouTube, several days.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Carol.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We have a question about, what if your family rules don't jive with one child? We don't allow certain things, but they want it. So yeah, one child will always push the boundaries more than another child, right? Because birth order, once again, makes a difference. So you have to just do your best with some of that. And so you have to, we have to be consistent, right? So here's the family value system of the whole house, certain level, here's the bar, right? Lying, cheating, stealing, whatever, this is the bar. And then here's certain consequences. Every child is different. Every child will be needed to be parented different. That doesn't mean you bring your value system down to their level though, right? But you just have to get to the root of that issue with that one child. There's always something else going on, and it's not what you probably think. So so it says they have an 8-year-old and I am the parent and we are both okay, but I want to make sure that they stay okay. Space is really hard to master, actually. So so while if this is recorded, I don't know how to balance it very well because she doesn't think she needs to be parented anymore, but sure where I'm going wrong there. So yeah, so of course that's where Love and Logics comes in, because we say that about 17, a child, if she's 18, it does not need to be parented anymore, actually. Now, is there rules in your house? Yes, that's different. Parented is, so you're not going into the adult role because you always stay in the parental role. And the parent, we're talking about the parent ego. If she goes into the parent ego, then she starts being bossy and she starts taking over, right? But you stay in the parental role. That doesn't ever reverse. You you stay in the parental role with boundaries. But what happens with the kids is their brain starts pruning, and this is Brainstorm by Dan Siegel. And I have him referenced, but not this one, but Brainstorm Mindsight. Brainstorm says their brain's pruning and they need to push boundaries for their brain to prune, and you need to hold the boundaries. So it's a balancing act. It's really hard when your kids turn that age and they're trying to be out on their own and their brain's pruning, but at the same time, if they're living at home, which most are, a lot of kids are now, more than ever. And so then it's really tough to hold the boundaries, but you sit down and say, okay, these are the boundaries and these are the rewards that are taken away when this happens. If you don't come home on time, still need to come home on time. Yeah, 18, then you have to decide which boundaries you're going to hold and which ones you're going to say, you know what, I'll let you go with this one. How do you get to the root? Yeah, a little bit of therapy. You get to the root issue. And so last of 5, yeah, the youngest child, that lost child, they're trying to make it because they're lost. They've been lost their whole childhood. So I promise. So it's kind of funny. I joke about it. I show kids, I tell families in my office, like, kind of how they act. They're like, how did you know? I'm like, well, birth order. But what can we do when our house is super supportive and the kids at their house divorced, emotionally neglectful? Yeah, so what can you do when one house is super supportive and the other house is emotionally neglectful? That's just tough with divorce. You can watch my divorce co-parenting one and my divorce coping with change webinar. Those are 2 separate ones. Divorce, helping kids handle change, and divorce. You do the best you can because you have no control over the other house. That's it. 0. This doesn't happen. You do the best you can, and you just try to make sure that they have the support that you need wherever they're at. What kind of therapy do you know what to look for at the finding the root? So what kind of therapy to finding the root issue? So when a child is got behavioral issues, it's always stemmed from an emotional need not being met. Now we don't know what that emotional need is most of the time. And so in therapy, though, you have a professional coming at it this way and that way, and the child and the parent is sitting in there going, okay, what's really going on? And I don't know about other therapists, but I know what kind of therapy I do is we get to the root, and we get to the root very quickly. The root is some of these examples: trauma, attachment style, and loss grief. And for adults, it goes into resentment and deep-rooted issues and why there's a behavior happening. So it's a little bit of why. I usually just what's going on. So CBT does that okay. Talk therapy is okay. But when you go into root issues, I'm a trauma-focused EMDR therapist and a play therapist. So it's like getting into the neglected child. You have to go deep into where the little child felt, unattached or neglected at some point. Doesn't mean you're a horrible parent. It just means finding out what's going on there. And why is it that we're pushing the boundary when the family rules? Back to that, it's like here's the bar, here's the family rules, and these are our value systems. So a little bit of that. Does that make sense? There's lots of different types of therapy to get to the root, but to me, it's loss, grief, and trauma of some sort. Always some sort. And we might not know what that is. And we think of big traumas, they're not big traumas. They're little T's, they're big T's, they're whatever. So let's see, anything else? Did I answer most of those? Sure. Yeah, my work, I mean, Blomquist, we are all kinds of therapy, all kinds of providers all across the state. So all kinds of, hey, how do we get to the root issue of what's really going on with my kiddo? Yeah. And there's lots of workshops on that I've done, but yeah, you can go in person and in video. With kiddos, it's just really hard to do play therapy, or anyone under the age of, I say about 12. It's really hard to do a Zoom, but you can do Zoom just fine, so we can do Zoom or you can do in person. Does that answer your questions? And if there isn't too much others, we'll let you go and you can let yourself out of the Zoom at any point. And happy President's Day. Get back to it, right? And you can email me directly too, just if you want, anytime.